Hi everyone, welcome to week 5 where we're going to be talking about economic class and its effects. This week I want to give you kind of a broad overview of what we define as economic class and how that's related to income inequality, to wealth, and then you can think about how that then applies to the readings that we have this week. So we're going to have a little bit more of an abstract approach this week, but I do want to give you that good foundation in what does it mean to have economic class, and because we all have it at some level or another, and how does that help to shape our lives. And then we can have as our additional discussion the application to the reading. Hi everyone, welcome to week 5 where we're going to be talking about economic class and its effects. Now I know you all just took a few minutes to write down how you define socioeconomic class. And now what I'd like you to do is we'll talk about it a little bit. Oftentimes when we think about social class, we think about it for individuals, but it's really more a suitable measure for households. Because when we think about wealth and income, it's not a suitable measure for everyone who is a member of a household. For young children who might not possess wealth and income themselves, or for older people who are dependent upon their adult children, or for even adult children who are still dependent upon their older parents. So it's more a measure for households than for individuals. Also, oftentimes it reflects non-monetary characteristics, including one's behaviors that are somewhat related to the amount of wealth or economic class that you might have. For instance, access to automobiles, camps, etc. Things that you might buy, ways of being that you have that are tied to your economic class and reflective of that. And your perspectives or your worldview, your, as the Germans would call it, Weltanschauung. And this is related to how you might think about what kind of taxes you pay, who should be funding schools, your political perspectives, your beliefs about the types of restaurants that you should go to, all of those kinds of things, what you do for leisure activities. Those are related to your worldview, which you don't oftentimes think about as this is an outcome of my economic class. But indeed, the way that we're raised, the resources that we have, determine how we exist in the world, what we do for leisure, what we do for work, what we do for pleasure. Education levels, income, occupation, and wealth. All of these things together help to determine one's social position. And what we find is that at first you oftentimes have your parents' economic class, and you're likely when you get older and you become an adult to have an economic class status that resembles that of your parents, because what they were able to give you in terms of education, in terms of the type of house, the type of neighborhood, the types of leisure activities, enrichment activities, and schooling activities, when you were a child, that's likely to help to determine the kind of outcomes that you have as an adult in terms of your own occupation, your own income, what you can provide for your own children, the type of house that you may purchase yourself or not be able to do so, and thus a reflection of the wealth. It's oftentimes a reflection and resemblance of what your parents had, but not always. And here what we're talking about is class mobility. That is the ability to go up or down in economic class in relation to how you are raised. So assuming that you didn't go out and gamble away that $200,000 listed on the previous slide, you could think about wealth, inherited wealth, as a transformative asset. It's not something that you earned with your labor. It's not something that you did anything to receive. It's not because of the goodness of your character. It is an asset that is inherited, and it helps your family economically and socially beyond where your own achievements and jobs and earnings would place you. Now, oftentimes, you can use those transformative assets and you can invest them in your education, you can invest them in social connections that might help you to achieve a higher job and higher earnings. And so thus you'll be able to use those transformative assets as a basis for increased wealth. As we can see here, there is a relationship between education and wealth. The household median net worth, median being 50% or above, 50% or below. This is the midpoint. Also with family structure type. So that there is a relationship between those. For looking at those who have a bachelor's degree or higher, which is of course going to be all of you, you can look then at the age group, and you can find where you are down below, and then to see what the household median net worth is of people who have those bachelor's degrees, which of course, again, is going to be you in a year and a half or 2 years. And you can see that as people age, their wealth grows. You can see that for those who are 60 to 64, their household median net worth is much higher for those who have a bachelor's degree, and the gap between a bachelor's and those who have some colleges is significant there, much more significant than when they're at the 25 to 29, just when you've graduated typically from college. Of course, this is also going to be true if you graduated from college later on. And then you can look at family structure, and you can look at the wealth of different types of families, depending upon if they're married or if it's a single male head or a single female headed household, and for age groups there too. What do we find here? Well, oftentimes we can understand this through understanding that having two wage earners in one household, that's going to be a lot of shared expenses. So rather than having to spend twice the money in rent, that you can combine that and have a single rent or a single mortgage, and then you can have more money in savings. We also see that there are significant gaps in wealth for different racial groups. And you can look back at the previous class notes and think about the previous weeks that we've had in our class and our discussions about the roots and the fruits and what happens historically and how that affects people in contemporary times and their economic class. And then think about how we can understand this, right? So if we think about the history of discrimination and how that has continued into the present with racial disparities, with education levels, with income levels, that's also going to affect their wealth level, the median household net worth. Homeowners with subprime mortgages and adjustable rate mortgages frequently experienced foreclosure during the Great Recession in the last 10 years. Why was this the case? Well, you start out with adjustable rate mortgages at a lower level of payment. You start out with a lower percentage. But then as the economy tanked in 2007, and especially 2008, 2009, 2010, the interest rates that were being charged, rather than staying the same, they were adjustable. They fluctuated with the market. So they increased dramatically. And that meant that the payments, the amount that you would have to pay every month for the same house, would also increase dramatically. And people just weren't able to keep up with this. People who were qualifying for those adjustable rate mortgages or subprime mortgages were not able to keep up with the payments oftentimes, and this led to dramatic rates of foreclosure within the United States. This is an older chart, but I really feel like it's fascinating because what this is looking at here is just income, not even wealth, but just income, and income between 2000 and 2006, before the Great Recession. So what's going on here? That we see that for the bottom 90%, that is, I'm sure all of us in this class, the bottom 90%, the change between 2000 and 2006 was that their income actually fell by 4%. And then, if you're in the top 10%, the incomes all rose. But as you get to the more minute percent, in the top 0.01%, your income rose 22% in 6 years, right? From 14 million a year to 17 million a year. There is then, for the top 10%, more gains right before the Great Recession. For 90% of the population, it's dramatic decreases. Here we have a really interesting chart that talks about wealth in the country. If you look at wealth and you think about all of the wealth in the United States as 100%, as this pie, how is this pie divided? Well, the top 1%, or I'm sorry, 35.6% of all wealth within the United States is held by 1% of the population. And then another 4% of the population, 95 to 99th percentile, has another quarter of the wealth, 27.9%. Then the next 15% of the population has an additional 23.7%. So combined, the 80th to the 100th percentile, right, of earners are having over 75% of all of the wealth in the country that's held by less than 20% of the population. And then the bottom 80, they share, or we should probably say we share, the smallest piece of the pie. 12.8% of all wealth in the United States is shared by 80% of the U.S. population. We oftentimes have the notion that we live in a country where you can pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Your success is really related to your effort and the amount of hard work you're willing to put in. Is this true, though? If we look not just at one individual, Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg, but is it true if we look at the population as a whole? Well, we have these great statistics that demonstrate economic mobility in the United States. And here we have a fascinating graph that includes the birth income quintile, dividing people up into five groups. And then it has your birth income and where you end up. So the bottom is where you start. If you start in the bottom quintile, there is a 43% chance that you're going to stay in the bottom quintile. And there is about a 4% chance, 4% of people in the lowest birth income quintile go to the top quintile for economic success in the United States. They're in the top 20%. On the other side of things, if you're born into the top quintile, there is a 40% chance, and 40% of those who are born into the top quintile remain in the top quintile. So it's not like there's no relationship between your economic class of origin and your economic class outcome as an adult. There's rather a very strong relationship between those, especially for those in the bottom and in the top.